Okay, so let's discuss a paper soon after reading it. And we selected a paper 2 hours ago and start reading it separate by ourselves, and then meet up again to discuss the paper in this journal club. So first, we will do self-introduction. Ryoichi, can you explain first?
Yes, hi, I'm Ryoichi Watanabe at Kyoto University, Japan, and I'm studying development of consciousness.
Okay, thank you. And my name is Yota Kawashima. I'm a research assistant at ATL in Japan and Monash University. And next, we will introduce the paper we read today. And the title is Temporal Stability of Stimulus Representation Increases Along Rodent Visual Cortical Hierarchies. And the authors are Eugenio Piacini, Liviu Soltuzzi, Paolo Muratore, Riccardo Caramelino, and Caspar Vinken, Hans op de Beek, Vijay Balasubramanian, and David Zokolan. And sorry if I mispronounce your names, but this paper was published this year, 2021, in Nature Communications. Okay, so I will give you just a brief summary of this paper first, and after finishing it, we'll start the discussion. Okay, so this paper investigated the temporal stability of neuroactivity along ventral cortical hierarchies, as the title says. But why? So the stimulus invariance, the response invariance of response to stimulus is known to be increased along ventral stream. For example, let's say when you presented a face stimulus, the FFA region is respond to the face stimuli with regardless of its angles or perspective, let's say the front or the side or probably the top, but the activity in the primary visual area, say B1, is not invariant. So the activity is variant, so the change across stimulus. But these studies or these findings are basically corrected when the examiners presented a brief static stimulus. So the question is, how does such invariance emerges under naturalistic view? Because in the naturalistic view, the stimulus is dynamic, so the change across times. And one possible interpretation is that in such condition, the invariance can be translated into temporal stability along visual stream. This is because, let's say, again, the face example, if you are shown face images moving from one side to the other side, in the FFA, the neurons in the FFA will continue to activate during the presentation from different angles. On the other hand, the activities in primary visual field, primary visual cortex will change. So the temporal stability will longer for the activity in the FFA, but shorter in the primary visual cortex. That is one possible interpretation. However, it's also known that adaptive top-down mechanism can suppress such activity. For example, if you continue presenting a face images for a long time, the activity will decrease for the later duration or the later period, which is the one example of adaptations. So the temporal scale or the temporal stability do not change across the ventral stream. I mean from V1 to the FFA or ID or other object perception. Or there can be another activity-dependent mechanism, which is measured by time span, over which fluctuation of firing rate are correlated. And this is called intrinsic temporal scale. So I mentioned three possible mechanisms or the interpretation hypothesis, but it is still unknown. So in this paper, the authors investigated or recorded the extracellular recording from rodent, specifically anesthetized rat. And they focused on the activity from 4 different regions in the ventral or the analog of ventral stream in rats. And the first is the V1, and the next is that lateral medial LM, and the third one is lateral intermediate LI, and the last one is lateral LL areas. Then the authors presented the natural scene and synthetic scene movies to the anesthetized rat and recorded the brain activities from the 4 brain regions. And the interpretation of the data is that if the temporal persistency or the stability is really happen or the increased across the ventral visual stream, then we should see the correlation, the strong correlation at the different time points, because the temporal stability means that the activity is similar between the temporally far apart time points. So they first computed the correlations. And they also did another analysis, which is a classification analysis. And again, they tried to test the temporal persistence here. And in this classification analysis, the aim is to distinguish activities, neural activities from different temporary, from different time samples. And again, if the temporal persistence happens, then by train the classifier from one time point and then test the classifier on the far apart, temporary far apart time point, we should be able, or the classifier should be able to distinguish or classify the activities. But if there are no temporal persistence, then the classifier will not be able to classify or perform the classification well for the data from temporary far apart. And that's the classification analysis. And what they found is that first, they found the temporal persistency along the ventral stream in the correlation analysis, and also verified that was confirmed in the classification analysis. And these are from the anesthetized rat results, and they also did the same or the similar analysis on the different data set. One is from Allen Institute data, and the other is from different data set. And for the Allen data set, they did the analysis on rat, awake, not rat, awake mouse. And then they found that the temporal persistency still happen for the wake rat. And also they analyzed the different data set, as I mentioned. I think it include the different behavioral states. So running and body restrained and free moving conditions. And they found that for the running states, the temporal persistency were still exist, but for the body restrained condition, wake body restrained conditions, the temporal persistency was absent. And I think that's the findings from this paper. And in the end, and they conclude that they observe the temporal persistency increase along the ventral visual stream in rats and also mouse for different states of different behavioral states and conscious states. But in some cases, they did not see the temporal persistency. And that's my summary. And I think I missed a lot from this paper because this paper contains a lot. So Ryoichi, if you want to add anything, you can do now.
Thank you, Yota. Yeah, I also can't understand fully this paper. So, and firstly, I agree with your summary. So, okay.
Okay. Okay, so Ryoichi, if you do not have any question to this paper, we can start discussion. But if you have any clarification question, you can ask first.
Yes, so I have any question about the definition of words or something. And I'm not sure that the temporal stability, this is important in this paper, but temporal stability is what to infer. Right?
So my understanding is that if the activity is temporally stable, it means that the neural patterns or the activity is the same across the time course. So in the, let's say in the, the simplified example, we have two neurons and each of them can take two states on or off, right? And then if the two neurons is temporarily stable, then it will, keep, active. So continue on states for a long time period. But if not the temporary stable, then the states of the two neurons will altered with quickly or within a short time window, let's say on, and in the next time step, or let's say in a 10 millisecond, then it will be off, or on, off, off, on, or things like that. And that's the kind of the my understanding of this word, temporal stability.
Yeah, I see. So, for example, the figure 3. See, figure C of figure 3 is something like this. So, temporal stability means that.
Yes, or
same way, right?
So I think one good figure is figure 1, which explains the model or the toy model of the temporal stability. So here they show the example of when they showing the rat face. Then if that, as predicted in this paper, the higher area, the visual area in the ventral stream is temporarily, stable. Then the activity for the phase will just continue for long duration. But in the lower level of visual ventral stream, then the activity will decay or just stop for a short time, in a short time.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I understand.
Okay. So yeah, because of this, or based on this assumption of prediction, if we take the correlation between activities from two different time points, let's say one from 0 millisecond and the other is 100 millisecond. This is just an example. And then if we see a high correlation between them, then we can say that, probably the activity will just stay during the 100 millisecond. And we can also do the same analysis for the time point of 1 millisecond and 200 millisecond, or 300 millisecond, 4 millisecond, and blah, 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 blah. And then as you increase the time window, the duration of time window, and the correlation should decrease if the time persistent or the time stability decrease. But as a function of this time window decrease for the tendency different between or across different areas in the ventral visual stream in the rats. So in the high level area, then the correlation will high, even when we considering the far apart time point, but the correlation is just not high when we are considering the neural activity from the low level area. Because again, as this paper predicted, the temporal persistency will increase along the ventral pathway or ventral stream. So look, okay, this is a bit long, but this is my understanding.
Yes. Thank you. Okay.
Other question or anything is fine. But yeah, I need to say that they introduced two different types of correlations. And the first one is the representation, a cortical representation time scale. This is computed from one type of correlation. And the other is intrinsic processing time scale, which is computed from another type of correlation. By the way, that this time scale is just just a rough interpretation is that the duration of or the lag between two times point where the correlation stays high. So the long time scale means long time stabilities. Short time scale is short time stabilities. And again, my question was that they introduced the two different time scales, or they measured two different correlations, but I was a bit unclear. I was not sure what they measured. And yeah, they mentioned that, well, yeah, it explained, but of course this paper explained if I read the paper in detail, but again, we read this paper in 2 hours and I couldn't cover the detail, so I just couldn't understand this part. But I think this But not sure. But well, probably very important thing, but I'm just not sure. Anyway, do you want to say anything about this paper, or again the question if you have?
Yeah, but also I have a question about, yes, I understand this the result of this study, or a conclusion of this study. I'm wondering, yes, also, yes, the study shows the feed-forward pathway, right? With the hierarchy of visual process, but something that are feedback or top-down process was examined, or this study shows that the hierarchical figured or graph. So the conclusion is that feed-forward model is preferred, right?
Or I think this is mentioned in the discussion part, unsupported by some results. But what they say is that this temporal persistency or the temporal stability preserved, even though there is some top-down or recurrent processes. That is their conclusion. So they did not say that, because we saw this result, the processes all, feed forward. That's not their conclusion. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So that in the higher order visual area, the temporal consistency is stable. Means it also includes recurrent processing in within the higher order area. So the stability is persistent, right? So they conclude. So we can think that it happened that they cannot say that recurrent feed-forward is only, but there is also maybe the recurrent process is happen, right? In the higher order area. So persistence, so the activity is persistent.
Yeah, that can be one interpretation, but I'm not sure what I mentioned in this paper. And their interpretation was a bit different, if I remember correctly. And again, it was mentioned in the discussion part, but I just can't recall where it is and what it was exactly. But yeah, again, if I remember correctly, and their conclusion is that, even though there is some recurrent or the top-down or adaptive, mechanism, the temporal stability just preserve. That's their conclusion. I think they mentioned something about that, and some results related to this part, but I just can't, recall. I just did not fully understand this paper, so I can't make any comments on that. Anyway.
Yes. So it's so this is not question comment for this paper, but I'm wondering. So if the activity persistency it happens, why how the mechanism is remain. So in the higher order areas, just within the areas, activity is replicated or something. Recurrenting in the higher order area, not but and this paper, this research shows that the V1 visual, so V1 and V1 is the not in the visual area V1, so there's no activity persistence, right? Or less than the higher order.
Less than higher order. There should be some persistence, of course, but it can be very short. And if we are considering the time stability in the higher, area and compare it with those from the lower area, then it's shorter.
Yeah. So according to the recurrent processing hypothesis by Lame, so V1 area is also the information will return or feedback to V1 also. So V1 is for how to say, so V1. So firstly, V1 is activated, then the information passes through the higher order area and return to V1 also. According to the recurrent processing. So in this study, the authors examined persistency, but not the return activity.
Or the degree of, I don't know whether it's a proper term, but the degree of recurrence or something like that, or the amount of the feedback information or something like that.
Yes.
They did not, first of all, I think they did not do any information flow or the connectivity analysis to assess whether how much activity is transmitted or traveled from one region to another, or just in the opposite direction from, let's say, the high area to low area.
So I'm just wondering. So
I see. So we kind of entered the discussion part, but do you have any other clarification question? But by the way, I found that you asked the question whether this result says that we should consider only the feed forwarders or something like that, the beginning of the clarification question pattern. But now I found that in the discussion part they mentioned and the result from figure 6B and C is related to your question. Yeah, so if you are interested in, you can just read, but anyhow, if you do not have any other clarification question, we can just start the discussion part.
Yes.
Okay, I see. But again, coming back to the point you made, the informational flow kind of analysis in this paper. Yeah, I think it's possible. But if we are thinking about the recurrent, we need to think about two types of the processes in a sense. One is again, as you mentioned, the sustain the maintenance of activity so that the activity is just continue. the sustain. That's something what you said, right? Because in the higher areas, you said that because of the recurrent process or the self, feedback kind of activity, the neural activity at the higher level just sustain. That's one types of, recurrent processes. But in this paper, they mentioned that the top-down adaptive processes is to suppress the activity. So my question or the comment is that, is it possible? I see, but okay. I now understand that, we can just consider the two different types of neuron, right? The excitatory and inhibitory. And if we consider or define the excitatory connection, then it's related to the maintenance. But if we found the inhibitory connection, then it's the suppression. Okay, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, well, yeah, can be possible, but for that we need to first say that, this neuron is receiving input from this and this and this neurons, and then after that we need to identify the types of connection for each, synapses. Interesting, but difficult, I would say.
Yeah.
And the ratio between the inhibitory and excitatory synapses and the input level can explain the suppression and the, maintenance kind of activity. But
I see.
Yeah, possibly we can do some model analysis, or we can, just consider one neuron, and then assuming that it receive input from, let's say, 10 synapses, and then we just assign the level or the types of, synapses or the connection for each. This one with this one, excitatory, and then changing the weighting and also the action potentials or the input information. Then we can somehow simulate the behavior of the neuron of interest, whether it's, suppressed or maintained. Yeah, but that's not, something investigated in this paper.
I see. Yeah, so makes sense. Yeah, I see. And the other thing I'm wondering, I think that in this paper they also used the moving stimuli, right? So moving, the neural activity or neural persistence with the moving visual stimuli.
Yes.
And also, they also introduced in the introduction section, normally the other or previous research, many previous research use the static visual stimuli, right? So, and I think the result or the, how to say, the kind of the stimulus is different. So the neural activity is different with the category of stimuli.
I see. So you're saying that when you present the circle or the disc, moving disc or the square or a triangle
Yeah.
or yeah. I'm not sure. I'm sure they mentioned what kind of stimuli they presented in the method part. But what I can say is that they presented or prepared the two types of stimulus or the movies. One is natural scene and the other is synthetic scene. And within the natural scene, they just use the video camera with their hand and record, and then present the recorded movie to the rat. That's one type of natural scene. And the other type is that attach the camera to the one rat and then record the scene, and then present the recorded video to another rat. That's also the natural scene, but it's not something you wanted to, have, right? Because the question is, what did you, or what the author presented? But obviously, in this paper or the exam, the figure, let's say 3 or like 5, 6, like they showed some kind of, shapes with different color, like black, Y-shaped object, and like white, like square with a hole shape, and also the not triangle. I don't know how to, explain, but like this kind of this sleeve, handed shape or with different colors. And I think this part is somehow important, but I just do not understand this paper fully. Anyhow.
Yeah, I see. So, for example, so I think yes, like something the global gist perception or the moving perception is earlier than the figure the detail of the stimuli. So gist perception is earlier than the detail perception. So, and the early perception, early process is conveyed with the feedback, like something, but the detail of the perception is need for the feedback. So the time duration it happens. So gist and the detail, and so in this study, or I don't know, but so moving perception is more biased. Is moving perceptions process is more feedforward than detail perception. It may be happen. So I'm wondering that stimulus, the kind of stimulus is the kind of stimulus affect the brain, so neural process.
So first, you're saying that there will be two types of or the neural processing, the early process and the late processes.
Yes.
And the early processes will reach the higher area much faster than the late processes or something.
Yes.
And I think this paper, they did not kind of, distinguish the two different types of processes. And they did not mention, let's say, while, or for example, activity at this point is correspond to the array processes, and the responses at another time point is related to the rate processes or things like that. So they did not mention anything about that. But I see. But okay, so you're saying that when you're presenting moving stuff, what you will know is not the detail, or what you will perceive is not the detail, but the gist of the stimulus, which means that in this study, what they can, find is something related to the gist, which should be correspond to the RE.
Yes,
visual.
RE or feed forward, right? And if the lat or participant responds something about the stimuli, right? Which figure if participant attend to the stimuli or focus on stimuli, I think the brain activity is changeable. Like the detail perception, something.
I see. I see. I kind of understand your point. So you're saying that if you add some task component in this experiment which require attention, then that will change the results, and it can, read the different, conclusion, which is probably the time stability is not happen in the higher area or something, or the increases along the ventral visual pathway or things like that.
Yes, and I predict that our activity persistence is happen in the higher area, not only but also the V1 or something, because feedback is more activated. I don't know, but
yeah, but like when you present a visual stimulus, which is brief and not brief, but the static, not the moving stuff. And if that's the case, then the suppression will happen, the adaptation will happen, right? Which means that the activity will suppressed, and
memory. But the participant, yes, also I think the static stimulus is appeared. Also, I think also the same. I think the same activation pattern, moving stimuli. But I think it is important that participate recognize the stimuli or stimulates figure. Activity is different, but if participant will not be asked to respond to something, will not to ask something, and just watching the stimuli shows the same result of the moving stimuli or the study. If the participant should recognize or the stimuli and use the stimuli to act the next classical next response. The activity is changeable. So for recognition.
Okay, so while I was listening to your comments, I feel like in this paper, in the introduction part, or maybe the abstract part, they mentioned that in the previous study, the investigation was mainly focused on the brief and static stimuli, and they want to see whether it will the result from these works can can be preserved in the natural scene or naturalistic view condition, things like that. But what you're saying is that within the naturalistic view condition, there will be different types of condition. One is like this kind, meaning that the moving stuff and related to gist. And another type is that the natural scene, but some of the participants, or in this case, the rat, may pay attention to something, maybe the prey, food, or something, which is still naturalistic view, but not related to the gist, because it's related to the recognition or some additional processes. Okay, so in that sense, yes, this is nothing to do with the recognition. This is just about the gist or the moving stuff. I think that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we should not say anything about the or the, I don't know, higher level cognitive function from this paper. What they show is that the temporal persistency, the stability will preserve for the increases along the ventral dual stimuli, which is the consistent with the prediction from the previous work, where the response invariance to the stimuli increases along ventral stream for brief and static stimulus presentation.
Yes. Yeah, so I see. So my comment point is not not this paper. I see, but after reading this paper, I'm wondering these things.
What I found interesting in this paper was that, by the way, we've already reached roughly 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you want to ask anything, you can ask now. Otherwise, I will ask this question or make this comment, and then we will finish the discussion today. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, so what I found interesting is that the temporal persistence, the stability, was absent for the awake, but the body fixed, head fixed situation. And their interpretation was some related to the predictive coding framework. And they mentioned that in that kind of condition where you cannot move your body, so even if the predictive error is huge, you can't minimize the prediction by making any, behavioral action. And that can be somehow related or explain, the result. Probably this, what I said might be completely wrong, and I could not exactly remember what this paper mentioned about the predictive coding, type of interpretation, but like something like that line they mentioned about predictive coding. And I'm just, I wonder whether this is the case or not, because the temporal stability happened for the anesthetized case and absent in the wake, but body fixed condition. And the temporal stability is larger, or the more sharper, the tendency is sharper for the awake and running condition. So if, let's say, that we did not see any temporal persistence in the anesthetized case, and it will kind of increases as you increase the level of arousalness or the wakefulness, but the maximum are at the most free condition, and the middle around the awake but the body fixed condition. Then it can be somehow or intuitive for me, but I am just wondering why the absence in the wake and body fixed condition. But yeah, not sure.
Yeah, I also not sure.
Okay. I wanted to say anything, or I thought that I can make something. I can make further like a question on that point, but I just forgot what I wanted to say. And it's almost reaching to 50, or probably over a bit. So we can finish the discussion today at this point. Okay, thank you for listening today, and see you next week. Oh.